Hi everyone, it's Monica, and welcome back to day 3 of 12 Days of Christmas. Well, today we're going to be using some of this beautiful metallic paper, and we're going to be recreating an actual vintage design. Now, this card that I'm sharing with you here is a birthday card, but when I saw the gold metallic on the outside frame, I just thought it would be perfect for a Christmas card. So I'm going to be working with the metallic paper along with this 3D medallion. And then I'm also going to be using this die cut from Spellbinders and this embossing folder that I've had in my stash forever. Now, I don't often use embossing folders, and I'm not really sure why, because they can create some beautiful results. But today we are going to go ahead and use this embossing folder because it is the perfect folder for this design. Now, the first thing that I did is I just cut down my paper to 4 1/4 and I think 7. And then you're going to want to go ahead and cut out your die first, because if you do your embossing first, then when you go to do your die, you're going to smash down all of that beautiful lifted embossing. And because we're going to be doing some sanding, you want to make sure that when you put your paper in the embossing folder, then you put it so that way your embossing will be up and not actually debossed. And that's because you're going to want to take your sander after you've embossed your metallic paper, and you're going to want to gently sand it, and that will bring up some of the Kraft in the background. Now, when I was actually sanding this metallic paper, it scratched it just a bit. It didn't just take off some of the metallic coloring, but I was okay with that because I wanted my card to be somewhat grungy and look somewhat old, so I was really okay with the scratches. And then I took my guillotine trimmer and I trimmed down part of the paper stock that didn't have the embossing. Now, once I had it trimmed down to the right size, and again, you're just going to want to make sure that you have a nice frame. I think it ended up being about 5 inches or so. It might have been a little bit smaller. But all you're going to do is you're going to trim it down exactly where the embossing starts. And then you're going to get some white cardstock and you're going to glue your frame to the white cardstock. And then using your metallic frame, I'm just going to line it up with that plastic guide, and then I'm going to trim it down so I have a nice border. Now, when you go to start decorating your card, if you're going to be using some dry adhesive to add your decorated card base to your actual white cardstock to create your card, then you may want to do that first, because we are going to be creating some 3D elements here. But to be honest with you, recently I've been using some liquid glue to adhere my cardstock, and I don't have to have a flat surface to do that. I could just hold the piece of paper in my hand, add the glue, and then put it onto my card base. But it's entirely up to you. I would just recommend, if you are going to be using dry adhesive, that you may want to put it onto the base of your card first. All right, so because we are going to be creating a fancy card, of course I had to have fancy corners. And this is a punch that I have had forever. I don't even know where I got it. I think I got it from my mother-in-law when she passed away. But I really like the corners because it really added to the fanciness of the card. And as you can see, it fit those corners perfectly. I think when I punched one of them, which was the third punch, it didn't quite line up, but we're going to fix that in a minute. The nice thing about little boo-boos is we can always cover them up with embellishments, and that's certainly what we're going to do for this. Okay, now for time's sake, I did go ahead and cut out those little medallions off screen because I wanted to have all of my supplies ready to go when I started putting together my card. Now, the medallion die is really cool because not only does it emboss, but it also die cuts as well. So you're going to get these two great little medallions using this 3D embossing die cut. And then you're going to go ahead and take those medallions, and using the bigger one, you want to go ahead and adhere it to one of the corners of your cardstock. Now, I didn't want my medallions to be completely flat, so I only added adhesive to the middle of the medallion, and that way I can kind of bend it or manipulate it a little bit onto the cardstock. You can also use some maybe 3D foam tape. I didn't have any handy, so I went ahead and just kind of created a flatness to mine. But by putting the glue right in the middle, like I said, I'm able to manipulate the edges of the little medallions to kind of pop up just a bit. Okay, so once I had my medallions adhered to my cardstock, I gave it a minute because for some reason the glue was a little bit slippery when it went onto this metallic paper. So I wanted to make sure that it was nice and dry and that it wouldn't move when I was adding more of my embellishments. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add flower right in the middle, and this can be a poinsettia flower. What I'm using here are little poinsettia leaves, but again, this is a really old die. Just find some sort of a flower or some sort of leaves that you can turn into like a poinsettia to add right in the middle. We just want to add some color to that gold metallic paper. So I ended up die cutting 3 different shades of my mauve cardstock, and the cardstock that I'm using was some of that distressed cardstock where you can actually take your sander and distress it up a bit. So I did that with all of my leaves, and then I came in with some walnut stain to add some more vintage color to the edges. And then once I had my paper all distressed, then again I just brought out my liquid glue and I started piecing together my flowers. And I alternated my colors so that way when my flower was all together, it would have nice different shades. Now, another idea also when you're putting together this poinsettia flower in the corner of your card, if you have any of those Christmas greenery, those would be great to go underneath the flowers. I didn't have any. I actually have some spring ones, and they probably would have been okay, but I didn't have any of the Christmas greenery. But you could easily stick those underneath the medallion, or either under the medallion or under the flowers, and have them kind of popping out towards the center, and that would be really pretty as well. So just kind of keep that in mind when I'm giving you some of these ideas for these cards. You don't necessarily have to follow my pattern completely. Think outside of the box. I'm just going to give you ideas to start that creativity mojo going, and hopefully you can add on to some of my ideas as well. Okay, now another idea, or another tip I should say, is when you are putting together your Christmas cards, don't forget about some of the product that you just bought for Halloween. I am going to be adding to the top of my poinsettia flower these heirloom roses. And these heirloom roses come in red and black, but they were actually part of a Halloween collection. And while I'm not able to necessarily use the black, I am able to use the red rose as a centerpiece or a center part to my poinsettia flower, and it really makes it pop up nicely. So don't forget about some of your Halloween product that you just recently bought, because it would be a shame to have to pack it away and not play with it until next year. And a lot of times I can utilize some of my product that I got during the Halloween season. If you saw my day 1 video, I used those new googly eyes with my Misfits, and they came out real cute. So don't forget about your Halloween product as well. Okay, now before we get too far in decorating, I also wanted to give you another idea for this card. Now, before we start adding that 3D poinsettia, you could have easily stamped your sentiment right in the middle. And that is also another design that you can work into this frame. I didn't actually do it for my cards because I wanted to use some of my ephemera that I got from Tim Holtz, and I'm going to use that to actually decorate the inside of my frame. But if you don't have any of the ephemera, you could easily use some of your stamped big sentiments to go right in the middle, and that would be beautiful as well. Now, the ephemera pack that I'm going to be working with is the larger pieces. There are 2 ephemera packs that Tim Holtz came out with. He has his larger ephemera pack, and then he has his smaller ephemera pack. And I want to say that he calls the smaller ones snippets, but I could be wrong. I'll make sure that I link them both below for you. But there's lots of options to decorate a card like this. I just kind of played around with some of the ephemera to figure out exactly which ones I wanted to use. But certainly you can go with in all sorts of directions with this type of a card. Ultimately, I ended up using the bell for my card because I really liked the way that it framed the top. And then I was able to add a nice little sentiment on that white part. So once I decided on the piece that I was going to use, then I just took my liquid adhesive once again, and I added the adhesive to the back of my ephemera, and I put it to the top of my frame cardstock. And then I thought that I wanted to add just a little bit more design. There are a lot of smaller pieces inside the ephemera pack, and I was able to pick out a smaller piece that I thought really complemented it. I knew I wanted to have some white showing in the background, but there's white not only on the bottom part, but you had it on the corners, some of the corners as well. So I just ended up finding this little special delivery tag, and I added it to the top, and I really think it kind of added just a little bit more to the design. Okay, so once I had my special delivery adhered, then I wanted to add one more of those red roses to the top right hand corner. A lot of times I like to have balance when I'm creating my cards, and because I had that big medallion and that flower on the left hand corner, I just wanted to add another item that kind of complemented the bottom left hand corner, and I thought that little red rose was a nice little addition. So at this point, the design of my card is pretty much complete, and now it's just time to start thinking about the framing of my card. And as you can see, I added that little black rose right next to that red rose, so I thought black cardstock would be a really nice complement. So I kind of played around with the roses just a little bit more, and then I decided not to add any more of the roses, and that's when I decided to go with the black cardstock to complement that black rose. Now, some of you might think that I had already had that black cardstock planned out, but really, a lot of my ideas come just as I progress through the card making. I didn't think I was going to be using the black rose, but ultimately I did. And once I used that black rose, then I knew a black cardstock to frame the overall design would really tie it together. So when you are working your card and creating your design, don't be married to any one idea. Keep an open mind, and be sure to add, little ideas as you go along, because sometimes when you're putting your card together, it just kind of starts to build off of your last item. So keep an open mind. Okay, so once we have that black cardstock framing our design, then we're at the home stretch. It's just a matter of picking out a sentiment to go at the bottom of the card. Now, there's several ways we can go about putting a sentiment on the bottom. We can certainly stamp a sentiment using an acrylic block. You probably won't be able to use one of your stamping platforms because of all of our 3D elements, but you could certainly use an acrylic block to stamp a sentiment on that white space. You can add one of those Tim Holtz stickers as well that has a little sentiment, and that would easily fit there as well. Or you can go with one of the larger chipboards. And after I adhered my design to my black cardstock, I decided ultimately to go with the chipboards. Now, if you've never worked with the chipboards before, this year they came in all white. And if you've bought these in the past, you'll know that past years they've come in white as well as red. And I was kind of playing with the white chipboard because, again, this is my newest set, and I was just looking for something that would work well with my design. And I did find the perfect sentiment, but when I matched it up against my card, I wasn't really happy with the white. I thought there was too much white on white. So I ended up going back to my old stash and pulling out some of the red chipboard because I really thought the red popped nice on the gold metallic paper. And the sentiment that I ended up choosing was Making Spirits Bright. And if you know the song Jingle Bells, Making Spirits Bright is one of the lines on Jingle Bells. Because I had that bell at the very top, I thought the Making Spirits Bright was a great addition to this card. So with the adding of the sentiment, the card was pretty much done. And as you saw, it really wasn't that difficult to put together. It was just a matter of picking out the right combinations and adding a few 3D elements to become a really pretty, beautiful card. And I don't know about you, but I really think that it was close to the vintage card that I shared with you in the beginning. I love results, and I hope that you did as well. All right, so as always, I'll leave a list of all the products that I've used to create the cards along with the links to the stores. And if you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button before you head out. And remember, I'm doing videos every other day, so I will be back the day after tomorrow with another video. And don't forget, leave me a comment because I am using your comments as my drawing for my giveaways at the end of my series. So leave a comment. Let me know what you thought of the card. All right, everybody. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you again next time.